Joel, welcome to the Bitcoin Source. Can we start things off by having you introduce yourself to the audience?
Of course, of course. First of all, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Joel Fulford. I work for a company called 10 Net Zero, co-founder, CEO. Really got started in the Bitcoin space through my oil and gas experience. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training from Canada originally. Went to business school, all that kind of fun stuff. Kind of have a varied background, upstream, midstream, downstream, power industry, all that kind of stuff. But eventually migrated to flare gas Bitcoin mining. Met my business partner in business school. He was a Bitcoin guy. I'm actually a friend of the pioneer of Bitcoin flare gas mining, Steve Barber. So those two people came together, and were in my ears, speaking to me all the time. And yeah, I just had to take the jump. Fell in love with Bitcoin, and just saw the opportunity to integrate that into the oil and gas industry, and especially down here in Texas, which is where I'm based. And yeah, that's kind of the short and dirty of it.
Thank you, Joel, for that introduction. That was awesome. The first question I usually ask people when I get on the show is, I really want to source their Bitcoin knowledge. Like, where did they start? How did they get orange pilled? So was there any books, courses, or even people in the ecosystem that might have inspired you to become a better Bitcoiner?
Ooh, yeah, great question. Yeah, so I mentioned Steve Barber of Upstream Data. He's actually a good friend of mine. We went to school together up in Canada. So, me and him, we played baseball together and stuff like that. And anyway, long story short, he left the oil industry he did a great job to start flare gas Bitcoin mining. And at this point, I lived in Texas. I was like, Steve, what are you doing, man? Like, what is this? What is this Bitcoin that you're doing? You sound crazy. So he introduced me to it, and got that going. And then in 2018, 2019, that's where I met my business partner, and he was a Bitcoiner from an earlier vintage, and he was just telling me, speaking to the other ear, about how great Bitcoin is and what it's about. And he had actually started a Bitcoin company selling like hardware wallets and things like that. So he was very knowledgeable. I could ask him almost any question about Bitcoin and go down a rabbit hole. So he was a great resource. And then, the Bitcoin Standard was a great book to read to really get an overall understanding of the Bitcoin. And then, what was that other? There was a great book I read, Layered Money, which was another great book that I really enjoyed to really show you the value proposition of what Bitcoin can be. And then, there's other books that aren't necessarily related to Bitcoin, but are inspirational from an entrepreneurial perspective. Like The Psychology of Money was a fantastic book that I read that really helped just get you inspired and get things going and get you moving into doing stuff. So yeah, those are all great books that I've read and really helped me down that path. Get the orange pill and just let it flow through the veins in your sense. And yeah, I love it. And then one thing I would add, this is kind of I think this is interesting. It's like, but if you ever read the Bible and the book of Revelation and the end times and whatnot, and how that economic system works and looks, that's also something that's always been in the back of my mind. And how, how do you opt out of that system? So from a, spiritual belief aspect, that was something that also kind of got me into the space.
I actually had Jimmy Song on, who's a devout Christian, and we kind of talked about some of those concepts that you were talking about with money being based around technology and kind of being used for nefarious reasons. And I think that Bitcoin has come in as this conduit to kind of really save humanity in a lot of ways once people fully onboard and understand it. Joel, I really want to get into Bitcoin mining, because I know that's your wheelhouse, and I want to talk about 10 Net Zero. And my question to you is, 10 Net Zero, it helps energy asset owners by mining as a solution, right? Do you feel the industry is changing for the better or for the worse as this climate change narrative becomes more ubiquitous in the mainstream media?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to say it's getting better for two reasons, really. One, I'll call it the climate change narrative, because I think there's a certain storyline there that people are trying to toe a line on, and that has infiltrated the higher levels of many companies, right? So what Bitcoin mining can do is reduce wasted energy and emissions. So it's good that that's top of mind and that's a KPI for companies. But it's really the larger companies that could use Bitcoin mining as a way to reduce Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions on their site. And that's coming from the top down, from an ideological standpoint. So I'll call it, that's good for our industry in terms of getting more Bitcoin hash on and more Bitcoin projects going. And then from a smaller perspective, I think that the reality is setting in that, it's great to have renewable resources, but you need oil and gas to operate for the next 50, maybe even 100 years, right? So that reality has set in, which some people think is counterintuitive to the climate change narrative, but it's not. It's a complement to it. And if we're looking to become more efficient in our energy usage, then Bitcoin mining is a fantastic solution to make your operations more efficient, right, from a reality perspective. So I think it's getting better overall, even if some of the narratives seem at the surface level to compete against each other.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that Bitcoin mining is still, in a lot of ways, in its infancy still. And, I just recently saw that Shell is sponsoring the Bitcoin conference. And I guess they have some multi-year deal where they're talking about energy and renewables and just the mining industry as a whole. So that's a big signal right there because, Shell's one of the main oil producers in the country. So I think that by them getting on board is really going to open up this energy sector for people to really understand that this mining industry is huge and there's a lot of opportunity there.
Exactly. I 100% agree with that. I mean, Shell sponsoring that event, I think it took a 2-year contract on it. It's like you said, it's a fantastic signal to say, hey, these oil and gas companies are not living in the past. They are looking to evolve. They are looking to innovate. They are looking for new solutions, and they're innovative. These were at one point, oil and gas companies were the most innovative companies on the planet, right? Before tech, they had all the talent, and now they're being able to move past this image of being just dinosaurs that just focus on money. They're not. They are looking for cool solutions, innovative solutions, and there's a lot of great people in these organizations that want this technology to come through and work. And like you said, that's just a great signal because the bigger the company, the slower they move. So if Shell's doing it, that means it's permeated to a certain degree, and I love to see that.
And Gary Vee, the famous entrepreneur Gary Vee, he always talks about profiting through arbitrage. And I remember seeing you on several other podcasts talking about this. So how is like helping energy companies arbitrage with Bitcoin mining? Like, what are your thoughts on that as far as like what Net Zero is planning to do?
Yeah, great question. So 10 Net Zero is really looking to solve problems for oil and gas companies, particularly, right? So the easiest one is flare gas. This is a resource that they've spent millions of dollars to find, and then they typically look to produce oil, and gas is a byproduct, but they light it on fire, right? It's just extraordinarily inefficient, and nobody actually wants the flare, from the oil producer to the president of the Sierra Club, whoever. Like, nobody wants that to happen. It's just that there's no other means to take care of it. Either there's no infrastructure available from a pipeline, or it's too expensive to get one there, or it's going to take too long, whatever. So energy arbitrage, that's what Bitcoin is really able to provide. So I can take your wasted energy, which basically has a $0 value, and I can now attach a price to that is worth something. And if you look at the heat value of your gas, you can do a correlation to how much Bitcoin, or dollars per kilowatt hour is how we typically talk about it, value to that gas, right? So I can turn zero into, today, with top equipment, you can get like $12 an MCF, which is huge. That's like 6 times more what you're getting at Henry Hub right now.
Yep.
So that's the energy arbitrage opportunity that you can have with Bitcoin mining on wasted assets like that. The other part there is, you can go on a bigger scale if you're a midstream producer, and let's say you're selling into the or you're at the Waha hub, which is in Texas, which just has a massive volume of gas going to it. And this just standard supply and demand. There's not enough demand. They can't ship it out of there fast enough, which pushes prices really, really low and sometimes negative. If you could put a Bitcoin mining center in and around that area, you could stabilize those prices, never see negative prices again potentially. And that's what you're doing. You're playing energy arbitrage. You can get cheap energy that is costing somebody money at this point, and turn it into real value through the Bitcoin network. And what's beautiful about that is that it's a point of sale right there. You don't need to ship this molecule across the country. You don't need to put it on a boat and ship it across the world. You can sell it basically through the Bitcoin network instantly on your site, wherever you're located, right? And that's, I think, really transformative in the midstream sense, because that's never been, nothing like that has ever existed before.
Most definitely. And there were two things that you said there that I think the audience, if they're not familiar with Bitcoin mining, might not know about. So I want you to kind of break that down. But you talked about midstream and upstream. And I know that 10 Net Zero is kind of really focusing in on those two
Yeah.
particular aspects of the energy sector. And how important will Bitcoin mining be for midstream and upstream energy companies that are looking to create this free flow or this stranded energy revolution that you're looking for, and what are the challenges there?
Oh yeah, I mean, great question. So number one, yeah, upstream just basically means you're at the source of the molecule. You're at the wellhead where the oil and gas comes out of the ground. That's upstream. Midstream is the transportation of those molecules from the producer to a buyer, seller and buyer. That's all midstream really is at the end of the day. So the technical challenges of getting in here is one, ideological. The most success that we've had is with typically with younger people in the organization that are coming up through. These are people that already grasp the idea of Bitcoin, already see the opportunity that exists in using this technology. So there's an I'll call it an age gap, but it's really an intellectual technology gap that is shrinking, right? So that's one challenge. The other challenge is just the classic integration of technology right on your S curve. So we're at the very bottom of this S curve. We're just starting to go up. We need to have off-the-shelf solutions for these very complex and hierarchical companies. You can't just be a random guy off the street that says, "Hey, I've got Bitcoin machines in my trunk. Let's go plug them in at your wellhead." You need to have, industry specific designs, UL certified. You need to have oil and gas experience typically to understand what's happening at the wellhead, typically a technical background. You need to have the infrastructure in place, your supply lines, you know, from minor maintenance to the supply chain of getting your machines, your engine rent, either you're renting, but you need to, your gen sets, or you're owning them, but you need to service them as well. So there's a lot of different technical components that come together to make this happen. What's great is that you can now get this right off the shelf from a company like Upstream Data or Giga Energy or someone like that. I'm plugging a few names, but these people are now producing this. So we are just, I think, in my opinion, just getting through the early adopters, or maybe we're still in the early adopter stage, but we'll be getting into the early majority soon, I think, just because you see Shell and every oil and gas company has looked at Bitcoin at this point, I think, and has done something internally with it. So once we move into this early adopter stage, that's when I think you're really going to see this uptick in the S curve of the adoption of this technology. And I'll add one more thing to that. One of the things that I think the Bitcoin industry is lacking in is really good leadership and risk mitigation. Like you saw, like great companies who have been around forever in the Bitcoin mining space go belly up because they didn't have good risk mitigation, or what I'll call traditional business models, like hedging and whatnot. Now that these things exist, I expect these things to be incorporated into the new, I'll call them the new age of Bitcoin mining companies. But that's going to take some time. It's going to take expertise from outside the Bitcoin community to really integrate these things. So that's a technical challenge as well. The people and the knowledge to assimilate that.
Yeah, and I was going to say, pertaining to Shell, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on this as well, was in this new write-up that they have. I mean, it actually came out in December. It's not that new, but they talked about creating a new form of dielectric coolant for the GPUs to keep them cooler, like an immersion cooling. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, because I think a lot of miners, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're dealing with a lot of heat coming off the miner. My thoughts on that, Joel, is like, what is your approach on that? Like, if Shell does come out with this new coolant solution, would that be something that you would utilize at your facilities to help keep things cool and more efficient?
Yeah, no, awesome question. So there's basically three forms of Bitcoin mining technology, right? You have your air cooled, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're just blowing massive amounts of air through your miners to keep them cool. Then you have immersion technology, which is where Shell would use its dielectric fluid. And basically what it is you are dunking, immersing your miner in this fluid, and then that fluid is circulating and is dissipating that heat. What's great about that technology is that you can now capture a lot of that heat that the miner was giving off that would be lost in air cooling, and you can repurpose it, right? You could potentially heat a home, you could heat a pool, you could do something else with that wasted heat that could add value. So that's something that's cool about immersion. And then the third tech that's coming out and is being developed is hydro cooling. And what hydro cooling is instead of dunking your miner in a dielectric fluid, you are actually basically putting up a heat transfer plate on the next to the miners, and you're circulating water through it, and that can cool down it significantly. So these three technologies out there and existing. A lot of R&D is going into the hydro. If you look at Antminer and what's MicroBT, they're investing heavily in hydro mining, not immersion mining. But air cooled is still the most most attractive option from a capital perspective for Bitcoin mining. So especially in the oil field, that's what we'll use. And I would have a propensity to probably go to hydro cooling before I went to immersion. But to answer the question, it's like, this is a great opportunity, right? Like Exxon, Shell, there's a lot of other companies that make dielectric fluids, and this is an industry that they see as a growing opportunity, so they can sell the dielectric fluid to these miner companies to get this heat. From a heat perspective, I don't think it would have any real effect on climate change because you're not emitting any hydrocarbons, any CO2 emissions or methane or whatever to capture. Because basically what happens is heat goes up and then it gets captured in these molecules, right? And that keeps the heat inside. So no, I don't think there's a case to say that the heat that's wasted from Bitcoin mining is causing warming because it escapes and it doesn't get stuck in the atmosphere. I'll call it that. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah, you definitely answered it, and that's more for the audience too that are, they're not aware of mining or what it's actually doing. They're just reading a lot of the media FUD or what they see in the mainstream media. So I thank you, Joe, for clearing that up for me.
And
And
I will add this point too, because I think this is really important, right? When we do what we call off-grid mining, which is mining that's not connected to any electrical grid, and we use a flare gas stack, we're actually reducing the amount of CO2 emissions into the atmosphere by up to 63%. So that's a net negative benefit of mining as opposed to flaring gas. And then two, this is energy that's not being used. It's energy it's not included. So when people say that Bitcoin mining uses a lot of energy, we use that energy for something else. Not in this case. There is no other purpose, no other case to use this. We're using wasted energy, which makes it much more sustainable. So just for the audience's benefit on that side, like this Bitcoin mining, particularly off-grid, is a phenomenal solution for sustainability.
yes, I agree with that for sure. That's why I have you on the show because I really wanted to hear, someone on the ground really focused in, solely laser focused in on Bitcoin mining. My last question for you, Joel, is what are your future thoughts on Bitcoin mining and what are some of the best practices that up and coming people that want to get into this industry can do to improve their chances of becoming a good mining company?
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, outlook on Bitcoin mining for us, I think, is great. Although we are in a bear market, this is a phenomenal time to build. Your cost of entry into the market right now is actually pretty low. So, i.e., your Bitcoin mining machines are a lot less than they were, a year ago or so. So that's really good for people who want to build out projects right now. I think the barriers of entry into this industry will grow over time. I think that's because it's a very capital intensive industry, but you could start on your own in your garage. You can mine at home and still do it profitably. And then you can move out and scale up, whether a small like on-grid connection or a hosting facility, build that out. Or you could, if you have an oil and gas background or if you want one, this is a good entry point. You could become a tech or something like that. Like the opportunities that Bitcoin mining is providing in terms of jobs and careers and projects is growing. So that's a really good thing that I'm seeing. And then what was the second part of that question?
The second part was, your future thoughts, which you kind of explained, but more so like some of the best practices that people.
So I'll use an oil and gas analogy. Mining Bitcoin is a lot like producing a barrel of oil. You want to do it at the cheapest rate you possibly can. So focusing on your marginal costs is a really big deal. Having a strategy where you can implement low cost into your operations is a really good best practice for whatever operation you're running. If you're looking to differentiate yourself, like for example, we offer immersion hosting or we only use the latest technology, you're playing in a dangerous area, I think, where that you could potentially get wrecked, right? Leverage is a very dangerous animal in this game, so you need to have cost efficient operations so that when difficulty goes up and Bitcoin price goes down, you are among the last miners to turn off. Like you need to have a low cost of power and a low cost of operation. So those are just good practices in general. If you want to be a Bitcoin miner, if you want to build a business, those are two key principles: low cost of power and marginal cost on your operations.
Nice, nice. Thank you for that explanation, Joel. This conversation has been awesome. I really enjoyed digging into some of these aspects of mining stranded energy using Bitcoin. And for the audience out there, please check out 10 Net Zero. They're doing a lot of great things in the space. And if you have a mining rig or you're looking for solutions, please feel free to contact them. But Joel, before we leave, could you give people your social media handles and any last words that you want to give the audience?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm only on LinkedIn. I never got any of the social media, so I'm kind of weird in that respect. But yeah, hit me up there. You can hit me up through our website. And yeah, just reach out. Happy to chat about you with any projects or anything like that. And usually make myself available to help people out. So appreciate you having me on, man, and let me be able to spread the good word and talk about 10 Net Zero. And love what you're doing. And yeah, keep it going.
Thank you, Joel. Once again, thank you for being on the Bitcoin Source. Have a good one.
Appreciate you. Thanks.